Our main character is named Michael, who was an ordinary college student until 20 years ago when the world was overrun by zombies. All the last years of his life, he did nothing but try to survive in a new environment full of dangers. Over the years, his mind began to crumble from the realization that he would not be able to meet his family, whom he abandoned in order to survive in this harsh world. Being on the threshold of death, he was not afraid of it because he understood that his entire existence was meaningless. In the heat of battle, he finally found peace. But by some strange miracle, he found himself in his childhood room, thinking that his life was flashing before his eyes. Looking around, he cannot believe that he is in the very place that was destroyed exactly 20 years ago, when everything began to change rapidly. Looking at the photograph next to his bed, in which he is carrying his little sister in his arms, it seems to him that everything that is happening is just a figment of his imagination. Everything around seems quite real because our main character feels the smells and touches of his body, which in the reflection reminds him of a young and stupid child. At that very moment, he remembers that it was on this day that the apocalypse began and decides to check where his younger sister is now. He remembers how on that fateful day his cowardice and fear at the sight of danger took over and controlled his body. After seeing the first infected person, he abandoned his sister who was sitting in a wheelchair, leaving her to die, and then regretted it for the rest of his life. After the memories flooded over him, he looked at the calendar and the exact time, realizing that his assumption about the events of 20 years ago turned out to be true. Michael realizes that, apparently, he has magically returned 20 years into the past. Opening the door of the room, he sees his younger sister sitting in a wheelchair, watching the beautiful flow of life outside the window. Unable to contain his emotions, the protagonist throws himself into the arms of his sister Sylvia in tears, and she does not understand what is happening. The confused girl, thinking that her brother had a bad dream, tries to calm him down. But he, without explaining anything, says that he will not make the mistakes that he managed to survive. He wipes the remaining tears from his tear-stained face with his hands and asks his sister to stay home while he goes out for a short while to run some errands. Sylvia asks him not to hurry and takes off one of the hairpins from her head and gives it to the protagonist, saying that when he returns alive, she will give it back. Having promised his sister that he will return soon, the main character changes clothes, realizing that there is very little time left before the apocalypse begins, and he needs to prepare properly. The main problem after the apocalypse began was resources, and a small 24-hour store was at the price of a human life. So Michael goes shopping. The girls working in the store are discouraged by the amount of goods that our main character buys and decide that he is out of his mind. Having collected almost the majority of all the goods from the store shelves, the main character asks if there is any more food lying around in their warehouse. When the girls asked him how he was going to deliver all these goods home, the main character pointed to a real van located near the store. After some time, having paid for all the purchases and loaded the contents into the car, even the driver is surprised why our main character needs so many supplies. While they are not driving, the man looks at a photograph of his family and tells our main character that he needs to spend more time with his loved ones, because sooner or later it will end. Having finished unloading the supplies, the man is about to say goodbye to Michael, but he stops him because he wants to pass something on to him. The main character asks the driver to finish work for today and go to his family, because the world will change very much in the near future and he needs to protect them. After some time, Michael begins to make weapons for self-defense from scrap materials. His preparation is interrupted by Sylvia, whose appearance clearly shows that she does not understand what is happening and expresses her dissatisfaction. She starts yelling at her brother because she received a notice that all the money they had saved up was being withdrawn from their joint account, and she demands an immediate explanation. Her brother smiles, asks her not to be so angry, and, hoping for understanding, says that the apocalypse is coming and asks her to believe him. The surprised girl puts her forehead to her brother's head, thinking that he has a fever, because what he says seems like childish pranks. Michael sincerely asks to believe in his words and asks his sister to enjoy the clean air and peaceful sky above her head one last time. Sylvia says that her brother is acting very strangely today and doing thoughtless and very strange things. But the girl notes that for the first time in her life she sees Michael so serious, and this makes her not deny what she heard. I understand the seriousness of the situation. The main character remembers that in the first week after the start of all the events, 90% of the Earth's population will die or turn into zombies. Somewhere in the city after nightfall, an unknown man receives a message from his superiors that makes him angry, and he hears a dog barking nearby. Unhappy that he will have to work all weekend, he throws his phone at the dog with all his might, venting his anger, after which he sees how it turns out to be not an ordinary dog, but a mutated animal that attacks its offender. Our heroes, watching the chaos starting on the city streets, are overcome with genuine primal horror. Sylvia, shocked by what she saw, asks her brother what is happening when suddenly someone starts knocking on the door of their apartment. The girl hears from the voice that it is their neighbor calling for help, and the main character remembers that in the past it was because of her that they encountered the first zombie. Sylvia rushes to open the door as their neighbor's cries for help become more and more persistent. Opening the doorway, she sees in front of her the frightened face of a woman who lives nearby and asks what happened to her. Any emotion disappears from Sylvia's face as she sees an enraged mutant behind the woman. Our protagonist's head flashes with memories from a past life, in which he, along with other survivors, went on a very important mission. Their group found themselves surrounded on all sides by high-level monsters, and panic reigned among them. The protagonist tried his best to buy some time for his comrades to retreat, while fighting against enemies that were superior in strength. Looking around, he noticed his close friend, who asked for forgiveness and simply left him to die, and ran away. Michael remembered that he himself had once done exactly the same thing, leaving his defenseless little sister all alone. At that moment, he realized how desperate and helpless Sylvia was feeling, and having time to react, he threw the weapon he had made towards the infected. Michael asked his sister to close her eyes, promising that he would protect her at any cost and that everything would be fine with them. He asks Sylvia to stay put and sees how the zombie with a stick sticking out of its skull rushes to attack again in the hopes of tearing the pathetic humans apart. The main character, with ease and composure on his face, parries the attacker's attack and cuts off one of his limbs. He understands that in front of him now stands the first, lowest level of zombies that appeared at the very beginning of the apocalypse, and they do not have intelligence. Without any problems with a few lightning-fast movements, he deals with the infected using his many years of experience. After defeating his opponent, Sylvia tugs at the hem of his jacket, asking her brother to stop and stop fighting. Michael hugs his sister, saying that everything is over and that everything will definitely be fine with her, after which he begins to look around because he hears someone's voice. His sister, not understanding what is happening to her brother, tries to help him, but the main character begins to lose consciousness. After some time, he comes to his senses and sees around him a strange sanctuary, shrouded in a blue glow and draining incredible energy. A few moments later, the statues located around the sanctuary shoot powerful beams of energy from their eyes at our hero. Our protagonist's head begins to split from the huge amount of information entering his brain, and he sees information windows popping up before his eyes. His body begins to change rapidly, and the voice of the system in his head says that a restructuring and study of genes is taking place. Having completed the transformation, the protagonist is informed that the recognition of the system owner is complete and he finds himself in a changed body. Michael feels his body filling with vital energy, and context windows in his head tell him that he can improve himself and his skills. He understands that in order to develop, he needs to pay evolution points, which he will need to earn by killing various infected. He can spend evolution points on various characteristics of his body, such as strength, detection speed, intelligence, and so on. Having received his first points, he decides to upgrade his strength indicators to increase his chances of survival. Better than his skills, he suddenly feels a surge of strength in his body and hopes that this time he will be able to change his future thanks to this power. After distributing the points, he again loses consciousness and comes to his senses in our world, watching as his sister waited all this time for him to wake up. Having regained consciousness, the main character's sister immediately says that her brother scared her very much because he fainted too suddenly and she did not know what to do. Sylvia starts to cry and says that she couldn't bear it if something happened to her brother, and he strokes her head and explains that everything will be fine. Having regained consciousness, Michael immediately understands that he needs to deal with the corpse of their neighbor, otherwise even more zombies will come here. But when he goes out the door, he discovers that she is missing. Instead of a lifeless body, he sees only a pool of blood and a trail that stretches down the stairs to the lower floors. Realizing that he will have to clear the entire perimeter in order to remain safe, the protagonist decides to change his clothes because they have become too small for him. Thanks to evolution, he grew a lot and gained muscle mass, and his body became much stronger and more resilient. Sylvia, who has moved into the room, hands her brother their father's things, which should be just the right size for him. While waiting for the t-shirt to be put on, the girl begins to worry about the state of their parents now, because there is real chaos in the world. She remembers how their parents left them alone when they were 10 years old, after which they were left to their own devices most of the time. After that, mom and dad started sending them money every year, and only this fact hinted at their existence. Having finished changing clothes, the main character asks his sister not to worry, because their parents are quite independent. Looking at her brother, Sylvia still can't believe that in just one night, he has grown so much and changed in appearance. Michael tries to make excuses and blames everything on a hormonal imbalance in his body, and also says that he will need to step away for a while. Sylvia is very worried about her brother and says that she is scared because the world has changed so much, and she is afraid of becoming a burden to him. The protagonist tries to calm his sister down by explaining that he just wants to look around and make sure their shelter is safe. He asks his sister not to think that she is a burden to him, because he does not want to end up in their neighbor's place, and in such a difficult time they definitely need to stick together. Sylvia agrees with him and asks him to return as soon as possible, giving him her hairpin, which according to tradition he must return. Armed with a dagger, our main hero leaves the walls of his apartment and goes on reconnaissance. He looks at the bloody trail left on the floor by the zombie he killed and realizes that they live on the top floor, all the danger will be below. Michael begins to slowly descend the stairs, carefully examining each floor and checking all possible rooms until he stumbles upon new infected. As soon as the zombie notices our main character, he immediately begins to move towards him, uttering incomprehensible phrases. Having rushed to attack our protagonist, the infected suffers inevitable defeat, since Michael has more than enough skills and experience in fighting high-level enemies. The context menu informs the protagonist that for each entry-level zombie, he receives 1 evolution point. Also looking at the upgrade window, he sees that different skills require different amounts of evolution points to upgrade, and to upgrade the same strength he needs 6 points. The most expensive thing is to pump up the mental spirit, because in a past life, he heard about people who had various mental spirit skills and decides that this is perhaps the most important characteristic. Looking at his skills, he understands that to obtain the ability he needs the 10th level of mental spirit, and at the moment it is better to pump up other skills and leave it for later. Descending to lower and lower floors, our protagonist's main priority goal becomes killing as many infected as possible. While inspecting another apartment, he sees traces of blood on the walls and furniture, which indicates that a recent battle has taken place. Going into the bathroom, he sees the lifeless body of a woman who, apparently, did not have time to turn into a zombie. Michael understands perfectly well that not everyone is able to withstand such drastic changes in life, and it is easier to end their own life. At that very moment, his detection skills allow him to react to the infected behind him. Opening its huge mouth, the zombie is about to sink its teeth into our protagonist and bite off a huge piece of flesh. The main character manages to react and, using his dagger, pierces the skull of the mutant who attacked him. He must not let his guard down under any circumstances, because the tree of evolution did not make him immortal. After clearing the next floor, he decides not to delay and continue to inspect the building, since he doesn't have much time left. While inspecting the next floor, he is noticed by a certain woman who managed to survive and, apparently, is also one of the residents of this house. After knocking on the door and asking if there are any survivors, the woman looks out of the doorway and says that her apartment is safe, and asks to be left alone. The main character asks to be allowed to personally verify the safety of her shelter, because he does not want to use force. The woman nevertheless decides to let the main character into her apartment for a short while, where everything looks quite peaceful and calm. While looking around the room, Michael notices a photograph hanging on the wall and decides to ask where her husband and child are now. The woman replies that her son is at school, and her husband went to meet him, and they still haven't returned and she is very worried about them. After which she asks him to leave her apartment because she is very scared. And as soon as our main character is about to leave, he hears strange sounds coming from the bedroom. He immediately decides to check what exactly is causing the noise, and the woman with a frightened look on her face tries to stop him, saying that there is no one else here. Michael begins to open the doorway, with blood visible on the other side, and the woman tries her best to stop him. Entering the room, he sees a small silhouette of a man holding a bloody corpse in his hand. This terrifying image, apparently, is the son of that very woman who turned into a zombie. He asks with a crazy smile to play with him. At that very second, the main character manages to react to the fact that the woman standing behind him is trying to attack him. Having dodged the attack, he does not understand what is happening and asks why she is behaving like this and why she decided to hide the presence of the infected. Without waiting for an answer, a boy immediately attacks him, making Michael surprised at how fast zombie children are. Using his new body, the protagonist falls on his back and with a powerful kick throws away the attacker's body. The woman he met immediately stands between the two of them, saying that she will not allow them to touch or harm her son. Michael asks her to come to her senses, because this is no longer her son, but a zombie that eats people, and if she continues to protect him, she will be in serious danger. The woman begins to panic hysterically and says that she doesn't believe it, because this is her beloved boy and he's just a little sick and she needs to wait until they invent a cure. She tries to dissuade our protagonist from killing her son, as the infected charges forward. The protagonist tries his best to convince the woman and also warn her that she needs to avoid it. But all his attempts are in vain, and moments later her body is pierced by a powerful blow and blood splashes everywhere. The child begins to eat his mother's body, and Michael immediately rushes to her aid in the hopes of saving the poor woman. Lying on the floor bleeding, she manages to grab the main character by the leg at the last moment, and even being on the threshold of death asks him not to kill her son. The protagonist, with despair in his eyes, explains that if a person has turned, he can no longer be saved, and he cannot allow him to walk the streets of the city threatening other survivors. Living the last moment of her life, the woman loosens her grip and continues to claim the opposite until the very end. The protagonist kills her son with one swing of his dagger, and blood splashes all over the room. He calmly leaves, leaving the corpses of the entire family lying on the floor and regretting that this happened. I go down to the next floors. Behind me, he leaves a stretched wire with bells hanging on it, which act as an alarm. Once on the next floor, he sees in front of him a huge muscular man who in everyday life was a fitness trainer. The colossal infected immediately rushes to attack our protagonist, holding a huge iron dumbbell in both hands. Michael manages to avoid the blow, but the force with which this zombie attacks is truly impressive. Because the stronger a person was before infection, the greater the danger he poses in zombie form. Not giving the main character a chance to breathe, the zombie immediately throws an iron dumbbell in his direction, which Michael also manages to dodge and jump to the door behind him. After landing, a powerful explosion is heard as another very powerful mutant appears from the apartment behind him. His appearance clearly takes our protagonist by surprise, and he manages to receive several wounds. In addition to the powerful zombie trainer, who has incredible strength, in front of him there is a zombified animal that looks like a huge dog. It immediately rushes to attack the main character, but Michael manages to parry the attack at the last moment, finding himself on the verge of death. The zombie dog still manages to touch our protagonist, and several drops of blood begin to fall down the floors. They fly past the stairs, attracting the attention of all the mutated ones located nearby inside the building. Michael realizes that the situation he is in is very difficult, and in addition to the two strong infected, he has attracted the attention of a large number of small individuals. The seriousness of the situation is reinforced by the fact that he has already managed to receive a fairly large number of injuries. The huge zombie trainer doesn't let him catch his breath and continues to attack with incredible force, destroying everything around. The main character still manages to counterattack the attacker by delivering a powerful longitudinal blow to the entire body of the zombie. The wounds received are not enough to even throw the zombie off balance, and he continues to attack with even greater fury. The situation is also made worse by the zombie, a beast that supplements its attacks with its speed and razor-sharp teeth. Michael decides to regroup and retreat for a while to come up with a more suitable plan to fight them. As he runs down the stairs, he comes across low-level zombies that were attracted to his blood and stood in his way. He finds himself caught in a vice where on one side his path is blocked by a crowd of infected, and from behind, two powerful opponents are advancing on him. The protagonist decides to go ahead because he has no other options to get out of this situation. He begins to deal with low-level zombies at a very fast speed, trying to clear a path for himself to retreat. A giant zombie trainer throws a huge metal dumbbell towards our protagonist, which knocks down everything in its path, after which he looks around in the hope of finding Michael's lifeless body, but finds only the corpses of his colleagues, not understanding where he disappeared to. Meanwhile, the main character manages to hide in the confusion in the nearest apartment, which apparently belonged to some gamer. Trying to catch his breath, the main character tries to understand why the infected are developing so quickly, because their strength has already gone beyond the first stage of the apocalypse. While he was thinking about the fact that the evolution of the infected was proceeding at an incredible speed, his opponents were already combing through the apartment in which he was hiding. A giant zombie fitness trainer finds our protagonist, who has been hiding behind the back of the sofa all this time. Without wasting time on thinking, he immediately attacks the main character, who in turn tries to defend himself from the blow by taking all the energy on himself. The energy from the impact is so powerful that Michael's body breaks through several concrete walls and ends up in the next room. For some time, he loses consciousness and, drowning in emptiness, he realizes that even after rebirth, he still remains a worthless and weak person, unable to change anything. Lying in a pile of concrete rubble, the sound of the bells he left on the upper floors breaking brings him to consciousness. He immediately remembers his younger sister, whom he promised to protect at all costs, and this thought gives him strength. Michael decides to immediately spend the points he has on upgrading his speed and strength, which allows him to get back on his feet. He rushes up to his apartment as quickly as possible, destroying all low-level infected with one blow thanks to the upgrades he received. At this time, Sylvia hears strange sounds behind the door and hopes that it is her brother and decides to open the door. Meanwhile, outside there are two infected people, on whose bodies light from our hero's apartment begins to shine. But Michael is already rushing to help. Having dealt with the zombie in an instant, he approaches the door and asks his sister if everything is okay with her, asking her not to worry because everything is okay with him. Meanwhile, a couple of powerful infected have already managed to reach their shelter, and he asks Sylvia to close the door and not open it to anyone at all costs. Michael points his dagger towards the zombies, saying that he will not allow them to take a step towards him. The zombie fitness trainer starts screaming furiously, saying the same phrase over and over, asking for a membership card to their gym. Having taken one extra step, the main hero immediately rushes into the attack, cutting off his leg, saying that he warned about the consequences, after which he immediately jumps up, soars into the air, and throws his dagger with all his might into the body of the zombie beast. At the same time, during the landing, he delivers a powerful kick to the zombie trainer, hitting his head on the concrete floor. The main character hurries to get his weapon back by pulling it out of the dog's body. And at this time, the zombie trainer tries to attack him again, although he moves much more slowly. Increasing the characteristics by upgrading skills allows Michael to cut the mutant's body into small pieces with a few powerful attacks. Our protagonist emerges victorious from this battle, and since these zombies are of a higher level, he receives more points for them. He also notes that there is very little time left before the crazy evolution of zombies, and if everything continues to move at this speed, he needs to adapt as soon as possible. After some time, Michael finishes checking all the floors of his house, completely clearing it of the infected. After such an exhausting night, he returns to his home and decides to take a shower while distributing the accumulated skill points. The main character decides to develop his skills evenly, investing a little into each available skill branch. That evening, after resting a bit, he decides to check how his sister is feeling and talk to her a little about what happened. Sylvia says she watched the news and it was said that zombies had appeared all over the world, but the authorities assure that they will be able to cope with them completely. Michael promises that they will definitely be able to cope, because even in case of failure, he will always be there and will definitely protect his sister. Sylvia says that today she was very scared because she was worried that her brother would not come back. If she could walk, she would make every effort to make their survival easier. The main character tries to encourage his sister by saying that she will definitely be able to get back on her feet, and she in turn asks not to feel sorry for her because it is impossible. Reflecting on everything that happened, Michael hopes that there is a chance to cure his sister, because today, the meteor shower will begin, which became a turning point after the beginning of the apocalypse. After some time, a huge number of meteorites begin to fall from the sky, and Michael remembers that in his past life this was the cause of the first evolution of zombies. Inside these meteorites are special cores that can strengthen both zombies and ordinary people. If he can get them in sufficient quantities, he will change the world. Together with his sister, they watch from the roof of the house as a meteor shower begins to destroy everything around, turning our civilization into stone ruins. At one point, one of the meteorites falls right near the house of our main characters, which could well have ended their lives. Looking at the map, Michael realizes that he fell a short distance from their house, and with his speed, he can get there within an hour. The protagonist decides to make some preparations and go to the meteorite crash site the next morning to get the core and try to cure his sister. A smile appears on his face because he begins to believe that a small ray of hope for at least a fleeting bright future has appeared in their lives. The day after meteorites riddled all the fruits of civilization in our world, a huge dusty haze hangs over the city. At this time, Sylvia realizes that her brother wants to go outside the house and tries to dissuade him by saying that it is not safe. Michael explains that he is going outside on a very important matter and is doing it for her and all of humanity. His sister, with a displeased expression on her face, asks him not to talk about it because she would prefer her brother to be safe and sound in exchange for the ability to walk. The main character asks for forgiveness and says that there is complete confusion, leaving his sister a walkie-talkie, thanks to which they will be able to maintain contact. While going down the elevator to the first floor, the protagonist is slightly upset, realizing that he could have offended his beloved little sister. His thoughts are interrupted by Sylvia, who decides to check if the radio is working and apologizes for her behavior, saying that she understands that all this is being done for her sake. Once on the first floor, Michael asks for forgiveness and says that he needs to go and asks his sister not to go anywhere until he arrives. Finally, the girl tells him to check his pockets, in which she left him her hairpin, which he must definitely return to her upon his return. Michael leaves the walls of his house, promising to return before dark, and begins to move towards the fallen meteorite, avoiding unnecessary clashes with the infected. At this time in the city, a group of soldiers is clearing out infected people, trying to keep the situation under control. One of the soldiers reports to the commander that all the mutated in the western part of the city have been eliminated, and their numbers have noticeably decreased after the meteor shower. Meanwhile, a tall and stately woman named Megan receives the report from the soldier and becomes their commander. Her assistant, Lena, says that they need to give the soldiers new instructions and continue clearing the city. Megan orders them to continue patrolling the area and make sure they don't miss any infected. At the same time, their conversation is interrupted by a man sitting at the table who jumps up and asks the woman to immediately accompany them to the company. Megan grabs him by the shirt, explaining that she is a police officer, not his personal bodyguard, and if he values his life, he must listen to everything she orders. Looking at him with a frightening gaze, the girl asks him to express all the complaints that do not suit him in the current circumstances. Fearing pressure from Megan, the man can think of nothing better than to agree and stop being nervous. Leaving the men in jackets alone, the commander asks Lena to contact Mr. Leonardo, who needs to be given some information. At the same time, the second man sitting at the table looks angrily at Megan, promising that one day he will get this fierce cat. After contacting Mr. Leonardo, Megan reports that all the zombies in the area have disappeared somewhere, and most likely this is due to yesterday's meteor shower, and for now, they will continue patrolling. Meanwhile, Michael moves towards the crater left by the meteorite, trying to minimize collisions with the infected so as not to attract unnecessary attention. After some time, he finds himself at the very crater from the mouth of which a huge amount of dark energy is emanating. The main character decides not to rush to hasty conclusions and to examine the surroundings by climbing the nearest high-rise building. He sees a meteorite fragment located in the center of the crater, emitting a huge amount of energy, and in his past life, he had never seen it in real life. He also notices a zombie near one of the crater walls trying to get out, and who is not at all interested in absorbing the fragment. Michael realizes that time is starting to move towards sunset. If he delays, the zombie can absorb the energy, and this will become a very big problem for him. The protagonist makes a decision to use his speed to avoid confrontation and simply take the shard and run away. Once he reaches the crater, he makes a lightning-fast dash towards the zombie in the hopes of catching it off guard and finishing it off quickly. When striking the infected's body, his homemade weapon breaks as if it were made of glass, and the zombie's skin turns out to be as strong as steel. The zombie girl turns to our protagonist and greets him, and her appearance clearly indicates that she is definitely not a weak individual. Michael manages to notice her black eyeballs and golden pupils, as well as tattoos all over her body, and concludes that in front of him is a natural zombie. For a few seconds, he is overcome by a primal terror. As in their past life, they were the ones who most terrified humanity and were stronger than anyone else. In an instant, the infected closes in on our protagonist, grabbing him by the remains of his makeshift spear and throwing him into the air with incredible ease. Trying to land on the ground, our main character begins to be hindered by vines shooting out from under the ground like bullets. Having managed to get his dagger, he manages to cut the annoying plants and remains safe and sound. Michael understands that the original zombies have special abilities, and their strength and speed are at a very high level, making them not the easiest opponents. While he tries to understand why such strong zombies started appearing so early, the girl does not give him a chance to think and attacks him again. The protagonist decides not to engage in combat and simply try to take the shard and run away, avoiding unnecessary damage. Numerous vines suddenly appear in his path again, preventing him from doing so simply. The native zombie smiles as if mocking our main character and is simply having a good time. The speed of her skills does not give our protagonist even the slightest second to think and make decisions, and he is forced to defend himself all the time. Their powers are at completely different levels at this point in time, and even trying to defend himself, Michael still takes a lot of damage. Realizing the sadness of his situation, he understands that events are developing much faster than in his past life, and apparently, history is changing. At the same time, Michael notices how the meteorite fragment and the zombie are connected by an invisible energy thread. He suggests that the native zombie, like all the others, arose from these fragments and act as his protectors. The protagonist assumes that in this case, the infected will not be able to move far from the fragment and decides to break the distance with her by going beyond the crater. The zombie girl tries to stop the protagonist with a vine branch, but he manages to defend himself and cut them into pieces. Once out of her reach, Michael manages to catch his breath for a while and decide what to do next. He decides to take refuge in a nearby building and use it as a temporary shelter in order to regroup and come up with a new plan. He takes out a red glass flask from his backpack and decides on an ambitious plan, saying that he will need the blood of a dead man. After some time, he is riding a motorcycle and leads a huge horde of infected that he managed to lure from all over the area. Finding himself near the crater where the original specimen is located, he throws a vial of blood into the air, setting his plan into action. The main character manages to break the test tube, and all the contents fall out like a rain of blood. His plan was to use the dead man's blood as bait for a large number of low-level zombies that the primordial zombie would have to fight. Such impudence and insidious plan enrages the female, and she begins to attack with even greater speed and fury everything that tries to harm her. Michael begins to watch everything that is happening from afar and hopes that his plan will have at least some effect. Even with an incredible advantage in strength, the primordial zombie is unable to deal with the horde of infected rushing towards it so quickly, and they simply overwhelm it with numbers. The presence of intelligence in the original zombie allows her to get out of such a difficult situation and use her vine to fly into the air. While out of reach of normal low-level zombies, she begins to attack them from a safe location. At this moment, Michael decides to get closer to the crater and try to steal the fragment while the original is busy fighting. The only thing that worries our main character in this situation is the large accumulation of mutants, because of which he himself can fall into a trap. The protagonist also understands that he cannot delay this battle. Otherwise, the fragment will have time to restore the energy of the female, and it will become even more difficult. Unexpectedly for everyone present, a very powerful and ominous roar is heard, which can only mean one thing. Looking around, Michael and the original zombie notice a huge and ferocious mutated beast. He immediately rushes to attack the female, as he perfectly senses her strength and understands that he needs to deal with her first. The beast manages to knock her to the ground, pressing her with his paw, intending to tear her into small pieces. The main character realizes the deplorable nature of the situation, but understands that the animal has every chance of emerging victorious from this fight. But looking at its fur, he understands that it will soon mutate. This will happen if the mutated beast manages to absorb a meteorite fragment, and in this case, trying to emerge victorious from this battle will be pointless. The primordial zombie, being in a less than favorable position, still manages to attack the beast with his strength, throwing it to the side. The mutant clearly doesn't like this, and with even greater animalistic rage, he attacks the zombies. Not having time to react and keep up with the reaction speed of the infected beast, he still manages to sink his knife-sharp teeth into the body of the female. Michael understands that the situation is taking a very unexpected turn, and is already preparing to prevent the beast from finishing what he started, because if the original loses, the situation will become even more dire. At the last moment, the main character decides to stop, not believing that such a powerful opponent, possessing intelligence, lost so easily. At that very moment, a fountain of blood begins to spurt from the mouth of the mutated beast, and its body is pierced through by the roots of the vine. His body rises high into the sky, hanging from the spear-like branches of the vine, signifying his defeat in this fight. The protagonist realizes that this was all just a plan by the original zombie to lure him closer to itself in order to deal with two opponents with one blow. The female starts to smile and praise our main character, saying that the pathetic little man was not so simple as to believe in such a trick. Michael also says that she is not the easiest opponent, and he will have to sweat a lot to emerge victorious, after which he descends down into the arena, causing surprise to the firstborn, who did not think that he would personally come to her to die and lose. The female decides not to hesitate and immediately tries to attack him with her roots, but Michael manages to defend himself once again. He continues to fight off numerous attacks with the vine and notes that the fight with the infected beast and the huge number of low-level zombies has greatly exhausted the primordial. At her limit, she attempts to engage in close combat and personally attack Michael. This act turns out to be quite reckless, as the main character manages to easily cut off the attacker's hand with one deft movement. After this, the original zombie is overcome with animal rage and incomprehension of how a pathetic human being is capable of such a thing and promises to finish him off here and now. The main character is quite surprised that the female still has strength to fight, and all this time she has not shown her maximum. Looking around, he notices that the original is beginning to absorb the energy of the fragment, and with its help restore her wounds. After a few moments, she takes on a new form, becoming like a rose flower and becoming much stronger. Her speed and strength increase 100-fold, and she begins to try to finish off our protagonist. Michael understands that with his current level of strength, he will not be able to defeat such a powerful individual in any way, and tries to escape again. But his escape routes are blocked by vine branches. The firstborn says that this trick won't work on her twice, and they will decide right here and now who will be stronger. The main character slowly begins to run out of strength to dodge and defend himself, and one of the blows almost reaches its target. But at the last moment, the vine branches stop attacking Michael, and the body of the original zombie begins to emit fountains of blood. The protagonist realizes that the female specimen could not withstand such a strong energy from the fragment, and, moreover, her body is very exhausted after so many battles. She tries with all her might to attack Michael, saying that some pathetic little man cannot defeat her. Without much trouble, repelling the next attacks of the original zombie, Michael says that by continuing to fight, she will finish herself off. Using his speed, he closes the distance with her, realizing that the outcome of the battle is already predetermined. The exhausted female falls to the ground and prepares to accept her fate, realizing the dire nature of her situation. The protagonist threatens her with his dagger and says that he knew the outcome of this battle from the very beginning. Looking at the dying primordial zombie, he remembers that in the past he could not even imagine that he would ever be able to defeat such a strong opponent. In the past, due to the strength of the enemy, he made the wrong choice and regretted it for a long time. So he decides to swear to stand on his feet until his last breath, protecting what is dear to him. The context window informs our protagonist that for killing a native zombie, he gets 100 evolution points. Michael couldn't imagine that he would get so many points for defeating her, and decides that he needs to be more careful with the other shards in the future. After his triumphant victory, he decides to take the meteorite and is surprised that he can calmly touch it with his hands. Touching the shard with his hand, he feels its energy begin to fill his body, restoring his strength. Michael is in complete shock when he realizes that all of his wounds have almost completely disappeared, and hopes that his sister will also be able to recover and start walking. Just before leaving, he looks back at the body of the infected beast because he hears strange sounds and assumes that the monster is still alive. A huge amount of energy begins to emerge from his body, plunging the protagonist into horror at the fact that he is about to face another battle. His face shows incredible surprise at what he sees, and he cannot believe his eyes. A small puppy with yellow fur emerged from the body of a huge mutated beast. He picks it up and suggests that after the mother's death, the cub in her womb absorbed all of her powers and was able to survive because of this. Michael suggests that he can tame the newborn monster if he becomes the first thing it sees when it opens its eyes. The puppy begins to happily bark and lick our main character's cheeks, thinking that he is part of his family. The protagonist decides to name his new pet Goldie, and, having hidden it in his backpack along with a meteorite fragment, decides to return to his shelter as soon as possible. Moving through the streets of the city, a strange energy envelops everything in the area, attracting crowds of infected. This energy comes from the meteorite fragments that our protagonist carries in his backpack and acts as bait for the infected. Before he could reach his shelter, the ground beneath his feet began to crack and crumble into small pieces. Michael manages to dodge and realizes that someone has been following him all this time, and he won't let them get away just like that. A huge number of mutated giant rats, which have been following the energy of the meteorite all this time, begin to appear from underground. The main character manages to defend himself from the rodents' attack, realizing that his position is not the most advantageous, and now he cannot just fight them. At this time, Assistant Lena asks her commander to take a rest and at least get some sleep, because she has been standing on her feet for a very long time. Megan says she doesn't have time for that, and continues to observe the situation and notices our protagonist running in the distance and reporting that he sees a survivor. The girl is very surprised by the speed at which our main character is moving, and also notices that he is being pursued by a huge pack of giant rats. Although Megan is unable to comprehend how this man managed to avoid so many attacks from infected animals, she still decides to help him. Meanwhile, the protagonist moves towards their shelter, assuming that this building will be suitable for a temporary shelter where he can catch his breath. Once inside the building, the iron bars and concrete walls manage to hold back the mutants pursuing him for some time. Michael, having managed to reach the garage, sits down on the floor and tries to come up with a further plan for his actions, assuming that today he will not be able to get home and will have to spend the night somewhere else. Opening his backpack to check if everything is okay with Goldie and the meteorite fragment, he discovers that the crystal has simply disappeared. The first thing our protagonist managed to think about was that the shard was missing, or that his little animal had managed to absorb it. All these assumptions are immediately dispelled when the context menu of the evolution tree tells him that the absorption of the crystal is complete and the restructuring process has begun. At that very moment, the main character's body is enveloped in an incomprehensible aura, and he begins to experience a very wild pain that tears him to pieces. A moment later, his body begins to emit huge amounts and waves of energy, throwing back everything that was near him. At the same moment, the rats pursuing our main character manage to get through the concrete barrier and get into the parking lot. Michael realizes the deplorable nature of the situation, but he cannot find the strength to gather his courage and at least try to get up, and the tree of evolution is to blame for this. His eyes begin to close and he slowly loses consciousness, not believing that he will be dead here and now. At the last moment, Goldie manages to save her master by fighting off the rat's attack and standing up to defend him.
So what you waiting for? The clock is ticking, what you thinking? Boy, you're taking long enough. Forget the phone, you gotta get me alone. You should know that I know what you want. Come on, boy, what you waiting for? You got me. Come and get it, boy. What you waiting for? You got me. Come and get it, boy. What you waiting for? You got me. Come and get it, boy. What you waiting for? You got me. Come and get it. Your patience is running out. The anticipation's taking a toll. So why you stalling now? It's getting later. There's no need to be cold. I'm saying it again.
The body of the small puppy becomes covered with a thin layer of electricity and begins to emit a large amount of energy. He places himself between the attacking rats and his master's body, ready to give his life to protect him. Goldie begins to fight off hordes of rats by attacking them with electric shocks and using her speed and size to her advantage. The number of infected turns out to be too great, and through a breach in the walls, even low-level individuals manage to penetrate inside and surround our main character. The faithful puppy can't keep up with such a number of opponents and has to continue the battle with the rats located outside the building. Before attacking and finishing off our main character, one of the rats is met with inevitable death from a bullet from a gun. At that very moment, other surviving people appear in the parking lot, armed and arriving to help our main character. The gray-haired man asks Megan if they should have brought strangers to the shelter because, if he was bitten, they would have a very hard time. The commander replies that they cannot abandon the survivor. They need to isolate him and observe him. The survivors manage to take refuge inside the building, while Goldie remains outside to defend the shelter from the infected rushing towards it. At this time, Michael, being unconscious, wakes up in the sanctuary of the Tree of Evolution, which has noticeably changed. His body begins to be covered with clots of yellow energy, merging into one whole with the set of genes that he had. This process takes a very long time, but at some point our main character regains consciousness. While Michael was unconscious, his faithful companion spent the entire time fighting hordes of zombies. Opening his eyes, our main character realizes that his head is splitting, and he is trying to remember all the events that happened to him before he lost consciousness. Megan, who is in the same room with him, immediately points a gun at him and orders him not to move and to answer her questions first. Michael replies that he doesn't have time for that, and he needs to urgently go about things that are a higher priority. The girl is about to tell the main character that he won't just leave when he suddenly appears behind her. The protagonist manages to disarm Megan and throw her to the ground, replying that she doesn't have enough strength to stop him just like that. At that very moment, all the survivors enter the room and ask Michael not to move or make any sudden movements, otherwise they will open fire. Megan orders her men to remain still and explains that she is the commander of the military police and that they were the ones who saved him from certain death. One of the two men in suits says that the main character is an ungrateful jerk and they shouldn't have babysat him for 4 whole days. Hearing this, Michael completely forgets about everything that happened, realizing that he was out cold for 4 whole days. He immediately rushes towards the exit, realizing that all this time his sister is alone and in possible danger. Megan manages to stop him, saying that the street is full of zombies and it is too dangerous and invites him to stay in their squad. While Michael asks what will happen if he refuses this offer, a huge, terrifying silhouette is visible outside the window of the room they are in. A moment later, the monster bursts into the room, destroying everything in its path and letting out a furious scream. All the survivors immediately rush in different directions, trying to protect themselves and everyone around them. Stunned Lena, still a schoolgirl, experiences incredible fear and simply cannot move while standing in one place. The main character manages to save the defenseless girl by stopping the monster's huge paw with his body and blocking its path. At that moment, he realizes that he himself did not understand how he managed to do it, and most likely his dexterity increased many times over, as well as his physical skills. Not a single person on the planet is capable of holding such an incredible force of a mutant rushing at him with his bare hands. All the survivors, looking at what is happening, cannot believe their eyes and doubt that the stranger they met is an ordinary person. Using his newly acquired powers, the protagonist manages to throw the monster's body back. Realizing that his physical indicators have increased, he immediately rushes into the attack, intending to begin a battle with the huge mutant. At the last moment, his fist stops right in front of the beast's nose, and waves of energy from his blow spread across the ground. The main character realizes that in front of him is not a monster, but his little tame dog Goldie, who has grown a lot in 4 days. He begins to happily wag his tail and lick his owner, rejoicing at his return. Michael decides to check his skill stats and notices that all evolution points have disappeared, and a new upgrade point called Gene Enhancement has appeared. Trying to remember everything that happened, he understands that something amazing clearly happened to him, and most likely all the points were spent on his evolution. As he dives into his consciousness, he sees that the Sanctuary Tree of Evolution has also changed, and apparently he has experienced the first gene enhancement. When asked what happened to him, the context menu answers that the main character reached the limit and a meteorite fragment helped him overcome it. Michael remembers that every person has a genetic limit, and in a past life he saw high-ranking fighters who tried to overcome it, but eventually died. This term is called gene restrictions, and apparently our protagonist is able to develop indefinitely bypassing this prohibition. Realizing what happened to him, Michael, riding a dog, returns to the survivors who are both surprised and very scared. Michael explains that Goldie was very tiny not long ago, but after eating so many zombies he grew to such a size. Megan, like everyone else present, does not understand how the monster can be his pet. The main character says that it's a long story and he'll tell you about it later, but now he needs to deal with the crowd of infected rushing here. Noticing a huge number of zombies on the horizon, Megan understands that their strength is not enough to resist such a horde. The girl says that they have nowhere else to go, and they were able to find this place after a week of searching after the start of the apocalypse, and they have no other. Michael begins to warm up and asks the girl not to worry, because there is a military shelter 40 kilometers from here, and they can go there. The protagonist asks them to wait in a safe place while he single-handedly deals with all the infected, and Megan says that this is just madness. Michael asks to follow his instructions and then rides into battle on his tame dog. Lena, looking at everything that is happening, asks her commander if this stranger will be able to return safe and sound and accompany them to the shelter. Having reached the right place, the main character decides not to fight with his bare hands and to rip the road sign out of the ground. He attracts the infected with a loud metallic bang and asks Goldie to stand aside because he wants to test his new abilities. When faced with a crowd of infected, he makes a powerful blow with a road sign, destroying a huge number of low-level zombies in a second. Michael realizes that in a short period of time he has become much stronger, which is why his blows have become many times more deadly. Gradually dealing with ordinary zombies on his way, becomes an awakened infected who has reached the initial level. The classification that our main character uses has been preserved from a previous life, when the infected were assigned a rank, and this individual, although he has incredible strength, is still not gifted with intelligence. Trying to deliver a powerful blow to the mutant's head with a road sign does not bring visible results, and the metal bends like plasticine. Meanwhile, the survivors, led by Megan, finish collecting supplies from their old hideout and await the return of our protagonist. The man in the suit starts to panic, suggesting that he might not return and then they will be easy prey while here. The girl says that they need to stick to the plan and not panic, otherwise they will have no chance of survival. The man says that they clearly saw a crowd of zombies rushing towards him, and in such a situation no one can survive, and if they just sit and wait, then everyone will die. He adds that if they hadn't saved this guy that time, they wouldn't be in this situation, and if he voluntarily decided to become bait, then they need to get out of here as soon as possible. Megan asks to stop panicking and acting recklessly by asking her friend Leonardo to stand up for her. The gray-haired man says that he also thinks that they need to leave because they don't know if the guy is alive and they shouldn't take such a risk. For a second, there is a dead silence among the survivors and the girl agrees to go and check how things are going at the front. Leonardo and Lena try to dissuade her, but Megan states that this is the best option she can take. At that very moment, their conversation is interrupted by a loud scream from a zombie who appeared behind them. Having decided that they are all facing inevitable death, The infected immediately receives a powerful blow to his skull and flies away in an unknown direction. Michael stands in front of the survivors, saying that he had a little trouble on the way back and hopes he didn't keep them waiting too long. Megan says that they should be the ones apologizing because the police sent a civilian into the thick of things. The protagonist says that if it weren't for their help, he would have been a corpse long ago, and as a token of gratitude, he cleared out most of the zombies in the area, allowing them to move on. Michael says that riding on Goldie they can get to the shelter and the road should be clear of mutants. Megan is quite taken aback by such a statement and decides to clarify why the main character will not go to the shelter with them. Michael states that he has unfinished business and needs to find his little sister as soon as possible. After placing all the survivors on the back of her pet dog, Megan returns his backpack to him and wishes him luck in finding his sister. Finally, the girl decides to find out the name of our main character and asks to come back as soon as possible. Watching them go, the protagonist hopes that they won't make it to the shelter anytime soon, because at midnight the first stage of the apocalypse will end and awakened zombies will appear. The protagonist's increased physical abilities allow him to move through the city ruins at incredible speed. Having reached his old house in a short time, he notices that there are mountains of corpses lying everywhere, and traces of shooting are also visible. Michael uses the radio to try to contact Sylvia, while also trying to find out why the military was clearing out areas and not evacuating civilians. As he climbs the stairs to the upper floors of the building, he assumes that they could have been ordinary looters who, taking advantage of martial law, are causing riots. When he gets to his apartment, he notices that everything around him has been looted, and the front door has simply been broken down. Sylvia is also not found inside the apartment, and all he finds is a wheelchair and a broken photograph lying on the floor. At that very moment, the main character is overcome with incredible rage, and he promises to kill everyone involved in the kidnapping of his younger sister. That evening, a group of survivors drive around the city in a car and shoot the infected they encounter along the way. At one point, their car, filled to the brim with supplies, gets stuck in a crowd of zombies, and the driver asks his commander what to do next. Their commander turns out to be the man who kidnapped the protagonist's sister, and he says that he has already informed his uncle of their location and that they will be picked up soon. Sylvia asks her captors why they are doing this, because humanity should have united and fought together against such a terrible threat. The man grins, saying that he has no desire to die for others, and now is the time to use the situation to expand his power. At that very moment, their conversation is interrupted by Michael, who lands on the hood of their car. He immediately grabs one of the shooters defending the car and throws him into the crowd of infected. The driver of the car tries to threaten the main character with a gun, but he sends him flying with a powerful kick. Their commander takes a knife out of his pocket and, threatening to kill the defenseless girl, orders the main character not to move and to bow his head. Michael, experiencing incredible anger, instantly breaks the man's arm, knocking the knife out of his hand and shocking him. He immediately begins to threaten the main character, trying to boast about his family ties and the fact that they will definitely find him and save him. The main character says that he knows perfectly well that he is dealing with a local bandit who uses martial law and his uncle's connections to do whatever he wants. Michael holds the man's body over a crowd of infected, threatening to throw him to be torn apart by the entire crowd. His sister's kidnapper begins to pitifully beg for mercy, saying that he will do whatever our protagonist wishes and fulfill any of his orders. Realizing that persuasion does not work on our protagonist, his pleas turn to aggression and harsh threats. At this time, 2 helicopters appear above our heroes' heads, which, apparently, arrived at the call of this man to save them. The man starts laughing, thinking that salvation is near, but the main character simply lets him go, and he falls into a crowd of infected that starts eating him. One of the people who arrived by helicopter notices everything that is happening and asks to be connected with Commander Roger. A man reports that his nephew was killed by some unknown young man and that there is a little girl in his company. Commander Roger, who apparently was the same uncle who threatened the murdered man, orders the main character to clear the area. Our heroes are fired upon by 2 helicopters, and Michael, holding his defenseless sister in his arms, tries to find shelter. Having managed to react to the fact that they were fired upon with missiles, he moves to the nearest building to find temporary shelter there. He manages to run inside and avoid a direct hit from such a powerful weapon and save his little sister. The protagonist finds a safe room where he leaves Sylvia and asks her to wait for him here until he completely sorts things out. The girl understands the gravity of the current circumstances and asks her brother to be very careful and return safe and sound. After which Michael, leaving his sister in a safe place, returns to the street to deal with 2 military helicopters. Having come under fire, he realizes that fighting from the ground is not very advantageous and decides to retreat. The sounds of gunfire attracted a huge number of zombies from all over the area, making escape routes very difficult. Thanks to his superhuman skills, Michael manages to break through the crowd of mutants. The military commander on one of the helicopters observing the situation cannot believe his eyes and assumes that this guy is not an ordinary person. He orders the pilot to find a tall building nearby and land him on the roof, then continue pursuing the guy. Having dropped off my captain at Michael, I opened fire from a machine gun firing up to 70 rounds per second. Seeing how our protagonist manages to dodge the lead rain, the machine gunner cannot believe it, because an ordinary person would already be a corpse. At the same time, the military captain, being on the roof and armed with a sniper rifle, takes aim at our main character. He fires a precision shot with a large caliber round, hoping to finish the guy off with one shot. Michael's reaction speed and perception allow him to react to the sound of the gunshot and dodge the projectile, preventing it from hitting his heart, but he still gets wounded. The captain is informed over the radio that the object has disappeared into one of the buildings. I have touched it. The blood will attract the infected. Continue observation. Michael is trying to stop the bleeding. How lucky I am. Another millimeter to the left and I would already be dead. Lost in thought, the main character loses concentration for a few seconds and comes to his senses only when a rocket flies into his building. A powerful explosion occurs, completely destroying the entire building and the blast wave knocking out all the windows within a radius of several kilometers. The pilots report that the target has been destroyed, but the captain manages to notice some movement under the pile of debris. The smoke and dust cloud left behind by the explosion clears, and the military sees a huge dog with golden fur emitting a terrifying roar. "Goldie, you really helped me out, baby. You came just in time. I really need your help." The familiar releases huge wings from its body and asks its master to attack with it. While the stunned military cannot understand where this monster came from, Michael, riding a dog, attacks one of the helicopters. At this time, the pilot of the second helicopter, watching his colleague crash, loses sight of our heroes. Panicking, he quickly rushes to report to the captain that the target has been lost, when suddenly Michael interrupts him, climbing into the helicopter's cockpit. The squad captain, hearing on the radio that his soldiers were defeated, requests reinforcements, saying that they found a survivor. At this time, Mike, thinking that the battle is over, lands on the ground with the desire to introduce Goldie to his sister. His joy is interrupted by the military captain. "Hey kid, it's too early to rejoice. This girl is clearly very important to you." Mike, seeing that his sister is being threatened with a weapon, begins to scream and demand that she be released immediately. The man, holding the barrel of a rifle to Sylvia's head, declares that he would be interested in checking what is faster, the bullet or our hero's reaction. "Put down your weapon. You want me, right?" "My sister has nothing to do with this. I'll surrender without resistance, but promise me you'll let her go." Mike moves towards the captain with his hands raised, giving Goldie a final order to take Sylvia to safety. At this time, an infantryman armed with a rocket launcher, who apparently arrived with reinforcements, reports that the target has been captured and is in the kill zone. The captain grins and gives the order to open fire, and a shell is fired at our hero, producing a powerful explosion. The military is happy that the mission is completed, but as soon as the fog clears, Michael's faithful dog appears at the site of the explosion, taking the full brunt of the blow. The captain shouts into the radio that the target is still alive and they need to move to Plan B. But it turns out to be too late, and Michael delivers a crushing blow from behind his attacker. The man, having flown several dozen meters and received a lot of injuries, lies in a mountain of debris, and having miraculously remained alive, orders everyone to be destroyed. More missiles are fired towards Sylvia as Michael struggles to save his sister. A moment before the explosion, he manages to cover the girl with his body, taking the entire blow on himself. Falling to the ground, Sylvia looks at her bloody hands, hoping that her beloved brother is still alive. "Brother, don't scare me. Don't even dare to fall asleep. What's wrong with you? Don't leave me alone." Meanwhile, the captain still manages to get back on his feet, while simultaneously rejoicing that all his limbs are intact and he will not remain a cripple. Michael, opening his eyes slightly, wipes the tears from Sylvia's face with his finger and asks for forgiveness for not being able to protect her. "Don't cry, Sylvia. I'm so glad I was able to look at you again. It all seems like a dream in which I want to stay forever." After these words, Michael's hand falls to the ground, and his sister begins to scream at the top of her voice, and waves of powerful energy come out of her body. The captain can't believe they fired so many missiles at this guy, and he's still breathing. But his thoughts are interrupted by the snow that starts to fall from the sky at such a warm time of year. Sylvia, in a fit of anger, stands up on her feet as a disabled person, and a huge force begins to accumulate around her. The military captain does not understand what the hell is happening before his eyes, because ordinary people cannot control the elements. The girl, screaming that it was her fault that this happened and that her weakness led her and her brother to this, begins to freeze everything around her using the newly awakened power of ice. The captain's body quickly begins to turn into an ice statue, and his movements are frozen by ice and the fear of imminent death. At the same time, someone from an unknown control center is watching what is happening and says that a source of power, Absolute Zero, an evolution of rank S, was discovered right above them. The girl named Juno is quite surprised. An S-rank warrior has already appeared, and this is a really big event. She asks her assistant Rabbit to stop the airship they are traveling on, as she wants to personally go down and scout out the situation. At this time, Commander Roger is playing shogi with his old friend Commander Winston. I started playing defense because your attacks became very aggressive, my old friend. They discuss the situation that is developing in the world, in which Roger does not intend to sit on the defensive, because if he does not start to hit back, all of humanity will sooner or later be destroyed. In such a situation, wasting time on protecting pawns is reckless. You have aged considerably, Winston. The commander's young subordinate was about to stand up for his commander, but he managed to stop him. Winston says that, according to his information, Roger is recruiting soldiers from unofficial groups. This is true, my friend, because in the current situation, whoever gets these troops first will get all the remaining power. His answer is interrupted by a subordinate who reports the incident. They tell him on the phone that contact with the entire detachment that was sent to clean up the suspicious guy has been lost. Flock of sheep, you can't handle two kids. Always have to do everything yourself. Roger apologizes, saying that he has already won, and asks Winston to think again about stopping building shelters and handing over all forces to him to fight the infected. The old man leans back in his chair. Maybe I really am getting old. But our main task is to protect civilians. He thinks that if the city has already fallen, then all his attempts to save people no longer matter. Deciding to ask his subordinate Scott what he thinks about this situation, he replies that Commander Winston is still very young and all his decisions are thoughtful and pragmatic. You're such a straightforward person. I've always liked that about you. I promise that as long as I live, I'll protect the common people. Now go and find out what Roger was talking about on the phone. The subordinate smiles, encouraged by the words of his captain, and, putting his palm to his forehead, is ready to carry out the order. At this time, Rabbit tells Juno that she needs a little time to find a place to land. The girl asks her not to land the ship, but simply to lower the height at which she can jump out. Flying over the battle site, Juno jumps to the ground and uses the ice blocks created by Sylvia as landing ramps. Finding herself in front of our heroes, she notes that they used too much force and simply passed out. Looking at the frozen military man, he wonders how the skill he just awakened turned out to be so powerful. The Rabbit uses the radio to report that this is already the fourth of the 12 S-rank warriors. According to the inquiries made, this girl is not listed as the owner of Absolute Zero. Instead of her appearance does not match. Juno, looking at the wounded girl, suggests that there may be several owners of Absolute Zero. She takes the girl to her ship, leaving Michael alone, saying that they need to go in search of the next awakened. After some time, the main character's body, which is on the hair, activates the tree of evolution that permeates his entire body. The system reports that the right first level is open, and the process of divine evolution has begun, which has launched a huge number of tree roots throughout the earth. The tree of evolution began to search the entire area for any living creatures and mutants, starting to destroy them and pump energy out of them. All this power, collected in a matter of hours, began to flow straight into the heart of our protagonist, saving him from imminent death. At this time, Commander Winston's subordinate Scott enters his office and reports that he has completed the task given to him. He hands the commander a tablet with a video recording saying that this guy and the little girl were being pursued by Roger's men, but he managed to neutralize them single-handedly. However, he was wounded, and then the entire area became covered in ice for unknown reasons. At the end of the recording, rays resembling tree roots began to emanate from this place, after which the camera turned off. In the final seconds of the video, Winston notices a stranger appear, whose face is too blurry to identify. The commander orders the cattle to go to that very place and find out what happened to this guy, and if possible, deliver him to headquarters. Something very inexplicable is happening. Roger's powers are getting stronger and my abilities have a limit. This world needs a hero. After a few hours, the roots of the evolutionary tree begin to retract, penetrating Michael's body. The system informs him about the accrual of 1,000 experience points that have reached the peak, which in turn triggers automatic distribution. At this very moment, the main character opens his eyes, trying to understand how he managed to survive and what happened to him. Looking around and not finding Goldie and his sister nearby, he rushes to inspect the surroundings, completely covered in ice, hoping that his loved ones are still alive. In such a hopeless situation, he decides to turn to the Tree of Evolution to find answers to his questions and penetrates deep into his own consciousness. The system informs the protagonist that the deification plan has been put into action, and only one attempt has been allocated for its implementation. Michael also tells us that he has awakened and all his stats have been increased to the 5th level of power. Looking at his stats, he realizes that his physical strength has increased incredibly since awakening. Thanks to the meteorite fragment he received earlier, he gains a new skill called Absorption. From his past life, Michael knows that the power of skills cannot be increased, and that it only grows with the increase of the wearer's physical characteristics, and therefore his new ability is equal to S rank. For a moment he thinks that he has become the first awakened with a rank, but at the last moment he remembers that he noticed a similar reaction in Sylvia, and perhaps all this ice in the area is her doing. While he was looking around the area, he didn't find his sister's body, and decides that he needs to find out what happened while he was unconscious picking up a fallen hairpin from the ground. Approaching the same captain, chained in a block of ice, he breaks it into small pieces and says that if the military is involved in this, they don't have long to live. At this time, a man driving a car passing by the checkpoint tells the private not to sleep at his post. It turns out that this is Cattle saying that during such an important period of building shelters, they need to be extremely careful and not let a single infected person into the territory. Commander Roger, who is watching him, and his subordinate, who Scott was visiting, understand that Winston is trying to extract secret information. Meanwhile, in one of the abandoned buildings, the main character decided to collect his thoughts and think over a plan for further action. Taking the soul into his head comes the thought that the best way to get into the military unit is to go through the shelter to which he sent Goldie, along with his new acquaintances. As the morning approaches, he sets out on his journey holding a photograph of his younger sister in his hands and promising to definitely save her. Having set off on his journey and moving towards the shelter, he easily deals with ordinary rank-and-file infected thanks to his new physical abilities. Trying to use his new recently acquired absorption skill, the system tells him that it cannot be used on normal opponents. Assuming that the skill requires a stronger enemy to use, he stumbles upon an advanced infected that gives off an ominous aura. The infected turns out to be quite strong as he is an awakened F rank and is easily able to crush the ground under his feet with powerful blows. Analyzing his opponent, Michael assumes that his strength and skin color make him a possessor of a very common rage skill that many had in his past life. Dodging his attacks, he manages to perform a grab and with a powerful blow from both legs, knocks the zombie out. While his opponent is unconscious, he manages to use his absorption ability, and this time it is activated. Before this, I only used it on awakened zombies. I wonder what will happen now. By absorbing energy from the body of a defeated enemy, powerful waves of multicolored energy begin to hover around, and the system informs that the absorption is complete and disintegration has occurred. At the same moment, Michael notices a new rage skill that has appeared inside the system, the scale of which is filled by 1%. As far as I remember, in my past life there were very few people who could awaken 2 abilities, and there were no people with a large number at all. The protagonist understands that now he only needs to collect enough skills and fragments, and with a gene limitation he will be able to evolve almost infinitely. His thoughts are interrupted by a strange sound and huge waves of energy, similar to those that occurred when he absorbed a new ability fall from the sky. A powerful wave of force pierces his body, and Michael, in horror, does not understand what is happening to him. After which, a huge mutated beast emerges from underground and, according to the system, it is at the level of an awakened monster. Michael's insight tells him that someone much more powerful is approaching here. At that very second, right in front of him, a powerful explosion occurs with peals of thunder, illuminating everything within a radius of several hundred meters. After the smoke clears, he sees his familiar Goldie in front of him, who turns out to be alive. The main character is very happy about the return of his pet, but he understands that it is not the time to get upset and he needs to deal with this monster. A loyal friend stops him, asking the owner to give him the opportunity to deal with him alone, to which Michael gives his consent. Having received approval from its master, the beast rushes into battle with an opponent who, in appearance, surpasses it in strength. Goldie begins to deliver devastating blows with her claws, making Michael realize that he, too, has evolved greatly during his absence. After a few minutes of fighting, Goldie decides to launch a powerful crushing attack, and his entire body is covered in a bright fiery shield. Having managed to capture his opponent, he begins to concentrate a huge amount of energy in his mouth, And literally a moment later, a powerful explosion occurs and not a trace remains of the awakened monster. You are a good boy. Congratulations on your evolution. But with such dimensions, it will be difficult for you to move, and it would be better to shrink to your previous size. Obeying the orders of his master, Gold shrinks to his original form, turning into a small, harmless puppy. Thinking about where to go next, the main character uses his detection skills to scan the entire area, sensing a huge number of signs of life nearby, and decides to go there. Mistress Juno, I will connect you to headquarters for a further report on the situation. The screen that turns on shows a blurry image and the silhouette of a person who is interested in how the case is progressing. The situation is calm, but something unexpected happened that I wanted to report when we arrived at the place where the meteorite energy was coming from. The fragment itself was no longer there. In its place, we found an S-rank warrior. Her skill is absolute 0, but she is not on the lists. I took her on board and await your further instructions. The mysterious man through the screen says that this whole situation is very strange, as is the warrior who is not on the list. The man orders Juno to immediately deliver the girl to headquarters, after which the rabbit sets course back to base. At this very time, a handful of survivors armed with machine guns are trying to fight off a wave of infected. Among them is Scott and the commander's assistant Roger, who does not understand how his colleague ended up here. I went on a mission, but Commander Roger did something to my car and I'm stuck here. How did you end up here? Roger's subordinate says that he was accompanying the scientists to the shelter, but suddenly their car was struck by lightning and disabled. He also adds that the people behind him are incredibly important for the future fate of humanity, and they must be saved at any cost. Scott explains that they won't be able to hold them indefinitely, and they need to come up with an escape plan. At that very moment, their conversation is interrupted by a collapsing wall through which a zombie of colossal size passes, which they cannot cope with. Roger's subordinate rushes into the attack, ordering everyone to protect the scientists while he distracts the zombies. Scott orders everyone to retreat and reduce the battle formation to save ammunition, because now the priority task is to protect the scientists. At this time, Commander Roger's subordinate begins to fight back against ordinary advanced infected with his bare hands. He continues to hold back the zombies rushing towards him, ordering everyone to retreat and take the scientists to safety. Scott, realizing that they are in a hopeless situation, orders everyone to follow his instructions and leave the battlefield as quickly as possible. Before he could finish his sentence, an object resembling a human body flew past his face at very high speed and crashed into the wall. Looking at the pile of rubble, he notices a wounded colleague who apparently could not hold out for long against a zombie of colossal size. The shadow of the huge mutant obscures him and the scientists, and for a moment it seems to them that their lives are hanging by a thread. At that very second, a powerful explosion was heard behind them, and something with incredible speed managed to protect them from the colossal mutant. Michael stands on the corpse of the defeated enemy, having already managed to absorb another % of the rage skill. Under incredible impression, Scott remembers that in front of him stands the very guy that Commander Winston ordered him to find. When he asks if you are the guy named Michael, the main character replies that it is him, indignant at how the military man knows his name. Scott understands that the goal of his mission is in front of him and wants to ask the protagonist for some favor, but he is interrupted. First, answer my question. You're Commander Roger, right? The stunned soldier, not understanding what is happening, answers the truth, saying that his commander is Mr. Winston. He also explains that they, along with the leadership, are aware of his situation and the conflict with Commander Roger, and they do not know who he is or why he is here. Remembering my past life. Michael remembers that after the apocalypse, all of humanity fell into madness, and only one elderly general stood to protect it until the end. When the commander found out what you went through, he wanted to meet you in person. I hope you will return to the shelter with us. At that moment, their conversation is interrupted by a powerful explosion, and a mutant appears from the crowd of infected, his hands covered in lightning. Michael asks his new acquaintances to protect the scientists and wounded comrades while he deals with the enemy himself. Goldie, you also keep an eye on them just in case, but don't transform unless necessary, otherwise you won't be allowed into the shelter. Looking at the crowd of opponents, the main hero understands that only the one with lightning is awakened, and all the rest are low-ranked and there is no need to use the skill. Before he could think of a plan of attack, a crowd of pawns immediately pounced on him, and it seemed to Michael that an advanced zombie was capable of controlling the weak. He uses them as a distraction, and while the protagonist is distracted, he tries to attack him with lightning bolts. The main character is surprised that the zombies have already evolved to a level where they began to develop intelligence And apparently, events are moving much faster than they did in his past. At this time, Commander Roger's wounded subordinate says that this advanced mutant is the one who struck their car with a bolt of lightning and knocked them out of action. During the battle, one of the electrical discharges hits the roof above our heroes, breaking the supports, and a huge number of fragments begin to fall to the ground. The falling pieces of roof and metal raise a huge column of dust, in the outline of which Goldie can be seen taking on her true form. After the smoke and dust clears, all survivors are found to be unharmed, with no idea how they managed to escape harm. The girl scientist says that she imagined and saw a huge dog with wings that saved them while simultaneously looking at the little puppy. Goldie's mind flashes back to the time he was ordered not to take on his true form, or he would not be allowed into the shelter, and he is overcome with fear. The little puppy starts rolling around on the floor, pretending to be a harmless and weak creature so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion. Meanwhile, another colossal fat zombie intervenes in the battle between Michael and the advanced mutant. Looking at him for a second, the main character thinks that his opponent has the skill of controlling awakened individuals. He immediately rushes to attack him, deciding that he needs to get rid of one opponent as quickly as possible, because together they will become much more dangerous. The survivors and scientists watching the battle cannot believe that an ordinary person is capable of fighting off such formidable opponents alone. Having exhausted the colossal mutant, Michael manages to use the absorption skill on him and receive another % of rage, after which he tells the electric zombie that it is his turn, and apparently this does not make him very happy. Ultimately, having chosen the right moment, the main character manages to get close to the enemy and use his ability on him. The enemy is defeated, and the evolution tree informs that a new lightning skill has been unlocked and 1% of its abilities have been received. A handful of survivors rejoice at the protagonist's victory, while scientists discuss the crystals left in the bodies of the defeated mutants. The professor in glasses looking at the artifact says that this confirms the results of his research, and since yesterday, these crystals have been appearing on the bodies of the dead. The old scientist extends his hand to the protagonist, saying that his name is Bruce and he thanks him for saving them. In a past life, the professor and his team were able to obtain energy from the cores of monsters, and thanks to him, genetic medicines appeared. In the most terrible times, it was this invention that helped ordinary people wake up and fight back against imminent death. Realizing that the greatest man who determined the fate of humanity stands before him, Michael shakes his hand and says that he is immensely glad to meet them. The intern asks Professor Bruce to come to him because he needs help, and the main character says goodbye to him, hoping for a further opportunity to meet him again. While the scientists continue their research on the infected without wasting a minute, Scott helps his comrade up, who thanks Michael. "Always happy to help, you got it the worst of all. We need to get you out of here, I'll try to find us a car." While they are still deciding how to get to the shelter, they hear worried cries from a group of scientists who are surprised by something. "Impossible, am I wrong? All the dead should have crystals, why aren't they here?" Bruce suspects that there is something missing in his research, and he had hoped that he could easily use these crystals. Michael understands that the professor has already begun to research the monster cores, and most likely he absorbed them with his ability, so he needs to explain this to the professor correctly. He decides to clarify what exactly Bruce is talking about, realizing that he cannot interrupt his research because of a mistake, and try to push him to the right train of thought. The professor hands him a green crystal and says that he needs to understand where these things come from and how they can be used to fight the infected. Michael says that it is unclear why they are called genetic cores, and he has already managed to eat several of them, after which he became stronger. Bruce, indignant at how one could be so reckless, scolds the young man, explaining that it was too dangerous to eat these kernels because they could contain a virus. After which he continues his thoughts about the fact that this in any case helped the main character become much stronger, and most likely they can be used somehow. The professor begins to develop his own theory, and the protagonist is internally happy that he gave the professor the necessary food for thought. Pointing to the two fallen advanced infected, he explains that he may have accidentally destroyed the cores in the two specimens while fighting them. Having completed all the preparations and having found the car after some time, our heroes move towards the shelter, and Scott, while driving, asks Michael about how he ate the cores. The main character says that the zombie cores he ate were the first to awaken, and he was just lucky, but it would be too dangerous for ordinary people to eat them. Michael understands perfectly well the military man's desire to become as strong as possible, but warns him against rash actions. Scott says that Captain Roger is secretly gathering awakened soldiers, while Winston spends his time building a shelter, and he wants to protect his commander. "Don't worry about your captain. He will never lose to Roger, I'm 100% sure of it." After some time, our heroes reach the walls of the base, where the construction of a shelter is in full swing. Looking at the preparatory work, Scott explains to the protagonist that the awakened with combat abilities went to Roger's troops, and the rest help Winston with the construction. Getting out of the car, Michael notices a red-haired girl driving towards him at high speed and asking him to get out of the way. Having lost control, the girl falls off the scooter and the main character manages to catch her in his arms. Realizing the situation she found herself in, the girl immediately begins to bow to our protagonist, asking for forgiveness for the inconvenience caused. Standing nearby, Scott realizes that his friend Olivia is in front of him and asks the girl what she is doing here. "Captain, we are so glad you're alive. Commander Winston was unable to contact you and we thought you had died on the mission." Scott hits the girl on the head saying that's not what he asked, to which Olivia replies that she came to meet the new survivors. "Michael, I'll report everything to the captain for now and you go through the verification procedure along with the other survivors, and I'll try to arrange a meeting for you with Winston as soon as possible." Watching the scientists and his new friend, Michael understands that it is better not to rush into trouble until he gets used to the new environment. Meanwhile, Olivia asks all the survivors to line up for further testing to see who among the people may be infected. The protagonist understands that Commander Winston is doing everything right, because in his past life, he knew many cases of terrible tragedies after security measures were violated. After filling out the form given to him, after some time he passes by a familiar girl who is accepting forms from other survivors. It turns out that it is the girl he saved earlier, Lena, who is very happy to meet our main character and that he is safe. The girl rushes to thank our protagonist for recently saving their entire group from certain death. Michael is very glad that they managed to survive, and also that the girl joined the medical team. Lena reports that the captain of their squad, Megan, holds a much higher position and has recently had problems. At this point, they are interrupted by the cries of a disgruntled crowd of survivors who ask the two lovebirds to quickly finish their dialogue. The girl says that she needs to work, and Michael finally asks Lena to look after his puppy. The girl is very happy to meet the little puppy, realizing that this is the same familiar that helped them get to the shelter. Alina agrees to finally suggest that Michael have dinner together today because she is very happy to see him. After some time, the protagonist finishes taking tests, and the nurse asks him to go to the waiting room where he will be told the test results. After some time, a menacing-looking man enters the room where all the survivors are gathered and asks the name of one man. A voice of a man is heard from the crowd, who is immediately grabbed by two soldiers who say that he is infected and must be immediately quarantined. The survivor tries to say that there is some kind of mistake here, but the commander immediately shuts him up, saying that this is not a kindergarten and the situation is very serious. The man, realizing that he has no choice, stops resisting, and traces of a spreading infection are visible on his neck behind his shirt. All the rest of the uninfected, the man named Michael must stay here, and the rest can go rest, and tomorrow they will begin to help build the shelter. The survivors leave the room looking at our protagonist, assuming that he was very unlucky, and that the same fate awaits him as the stranger who was just taken into quarantine. The commander says that he was informed about a certain important person by his name and asks to follow him to a special room. Michael sits down on the bed where he is asked to wait for a meeting with Commander Winston, and all the while he looks at a picture of his little sister. At this time, somewhere in the laboratory, Sylvia is in a strange capsule, and people nearby are discussing the fact that her blood test did not show the result they needed. After some time of waiting, there is a knock on our protagonist's door, and someone asks his permission to enter. Lena enters the room, greets Michael and asks him to come with her to dinner, saying that she will take him to the dining room. They walk together through the corridors of the shelter, and Michael compliments the girl that he did not recognize her in different clothes, and that she looks very cute. Lena suggests visiting her commander Megan and giving her a surprise because she would also be very happy to meet him. The girl also says that the problems she spoke about are related to the fact that Megan has awakened, and Commander Roger is trying with all his might to lure her to his side. This information begins to anger the protagonist, realizing that this willful warrior is trying to stick his nose where it doesn't belong. Their conversation is interrupted by an alarm, which informs that a conflict situation is occurring in the dining room on the 3rd floor. The girl assumes that most likely this is connected with her commander, and Roger's subordinates are again trying to bother Megan. At this very time, the mustachioed man tells Megan that Roger greatly appreciates her abilities and once again asks her to come over to their side. The girl says that she will not back down from her principles for any money or values that they offer her, because she is disgusted by Roger's policies. Megan is about to leave, but she is stopped by two men who were saved by Michael along with her and block her path. One of them says that they don't want to work for Old Man Winston all their lives, And since she is a very capable girl, they don't just remind her that she needs to choose the right side. Megan begins to lose her temper and her body begins to emit a huge amount of energy, and her eyes begin to glow red. Everything around begins to tremble, and the man notices that the telekinesis that the girl possesses is incredible, and now he understands why the captain needs her so much. After which he says that not only she awakened her powers and they both have F-rank abilities, fire element and metal transformation. A man throws a ball of flame at a girl and says that today she will go with them no matter what it costs them. Michael, who appeared at that very second, manages to repel the attack with his bare hands, reflecting the flying fireball. Everyone present understands that standing in front of them is the same guy who was able to single-handedly save them a few days ago. At the same moment, a mustachioed man behind them asks where this boy came from and why he dares to interfere with their conversation. The awakened man with the power of fire asks his commander not to worry because now he will teach this young boy a good lesson. Preparing to reflect in such two awakened people, Michael thinks about whether it is possible to use absorption on people, but at the last moment stops, realizing that this could lead to their death and attract unnecessary attention. Already familiar with a large number of skills awakened from his past life, he understands that half of his strength will be enough against the metal transformation. After he dealt with one of the awakened with one blow, he asks his friend why exactly they went over to Roger's side. Not receiving a constructive answer to his question, and only listening to pleas for mercy, he knocks out the second attacker with one blow. Megan, standing behind him, is surprised at how the guy managed to defeat two awakened ones in just 2 hits. Moving towards the mustachioed man, he tries to intimidate Michael by telling him not to approach him because he directly reports to Roger. Without listening to the end of his hysterical screams, the main character grabs him by the head and lifts him up on an outstretched arm, forcing him to shut up. Megan tries to stop the main character, the pig, from letting the mustachioed man go, because if he dies, they will both be in big trouble. At that very moment, armed infantrymen climb the stairs to the 3rd floor, asking everyone to calm down immediately. The soldiers surround Megan and our protagonist, and their commander orders the rebels to surrender immediately. Michael is already starting to accumulate energy in his hand. I'm going to fight back against the military, asking if they are too weak to raise their hand against him. How dare you threaten us? We are the law here. If you do not follow the instructions of the authorities, we will take you out of the shelter on it. Megan manages to stop the main character, asking him to calm down. Otherwise they, together with Commander Winston, will suffer greatly. Our heroes are handcuffed and taken to another room, while the mustachioed man continues to behave defiantly, looking down on them. Megan, I have a favor to ask. As soon as you're free, find out about a girl named Sylvia. This is my sister, whom I lost because of Commander Roger, and now I don't know where she is, so if you can, try to find out. While our heroes are being taken to another location, a crowd of ordinary survivors discuss the Battle of the Awakened, not understanding how one boy was able to defeat 2 of Roger's subordinates. Standing nearby, Lena and Goldie are worried about our main character, hoping that everything will be fine with them. Moving along the corridors, the mustachioed man stops next to the punishment cell, saying that the girl should be taken to the commander, and the guy should be left here. Michael completely obeys the orders of his willful commanders, fearing for Megan's safety, and is sent deep into the punishment cell. Once at the bottom, he sees in front of him a huge number of muscular men, creating a frightening appearance. The mustachioed man orders everyone to make this impudent boy understand why they can't go against him, and even if he dies here, no one will remember him. Michael easily breaks the handcuffs, realizing that Megan is no longer here and he can stop holding back. He can take out a dozen trained fighters with incredible ease using simple blows. You understand that the situation is not going well. The mustachioed captain, fearing for his safety, once again tries to threaten the main character and asks him not to come too close. His vile and mean behavior begins to cross all boundaries, and he holds a test tube with a virus from the laboratory in his hands, saying that if something happens to him, his subordinates will poison the young girl Lena. At that very moment, their conversation is interrupted by Scott, who, along with other armed soldiers, goes down to the punishment cell, asking his colleague for an explanation. The mustachioed man points towards the defeated fighters and says that this young man wounded 6 officers and should be punished. Scott grabs the man's hand, asking what the vial of virus is doing in his hands and where he got it. He orders the man to be immediately delivered to Captain Winston, saying that now no one will save him and that a cruel punishment awaits him. Michael thanks Scott for saving him and wants to ask for something, but he interrupts him, saying that first they need to leave this blood-smelling room. After some time, they both go up in the elevator, and when Michael asks where they are going, the cattle answer that he will soon find out everything himself. Having climbed to the top floor and opened the door, Michael sees Commander Winston in front of him, who greets him and asks him to sit down in a free seat. The main character is very surprised by the long-awaited meeting with the commander, because in his past life he only saw his statue, and now he can talk to him like an ordinary person. Dear Michael, I'll tell you straight. I think I can guess your purpose for coming to the shelter. Commander Roger sent a squad to kill you and your sister, and after the battle your sister disappeared. The protagonist is quite shocked by old Winston's knowledge and asks how he found out about it. And after a few seconds he adds to his answer that since he knows the reasons for his appearance here, he must guess that his main goal is revenge. When the apocalypse started, Roger and I were military men, but he only cared about power and wealth, not other people. I know about all his plans and that he wants to take over the shelter. Listening to Commander Winston's speech, Michael decides to ask directly if he is ready for an open confrontation with Roger. Exactly. But we are not in the best position and we need your help because I know that you are incredibly strong. Commander Winston says that Roger controls about half of the entire army and is secretly recruiting awakened warriors into his ranks. According to my data, he already has about 100 awakened, and we only have 20 and our strengths are too different. Michael says they still have a chance because Dr. Bruce's lab is under their control. Commander Winston says that Roger is interested in the parts of the shelter that are developing various weapons. The protagonist explains that most likely the commander should have reported that ordinary people can also become awakened. Winston says that he received such information and she still cannot believe that it is possible. Michael dispels his doubts by adding to his answer that people can obtain the source's weapons. Inside the bodies of zombies there is a special material called genetic cores, and with their help you can get very powerful weapons. Commander Winston immediately jumps up from his seat, slamming his hands on the table, saying that the young man is simply lying to him now and cannot believe it. The protagonist understands the commander perfectly well as his mistrust, and asks to use a pen and a piece of paper. Michael writes down some instructions on paper and hands the sheet to the commander, saying that the basic ideas for creating the source weapon are described here. He also says that if this information falls into the hands of Professor Bruce, he will be absolutely delighted. Winston understands that before him is a difficult young man who was a university student after all. Not even a week had passed since the apocalypse, and he knows so much. The main character is very happy that the old man does not ask him where he knows all this information from and allows him to keep the secret. After which he hands the captain a photograph of his sister, saying that he assumes Roger is connected to her kidnapping and asks him to check it out. After looking at the photo, Winston says that apparently things aren't that simple with his sister and hands him a tablet with a video recording from the surveillance cameras. At first I also suspected Commander Roger, but after a while I realized that it was not his doing. The commander assumes that his sister was kidnapped by an unknown organization, and Michael realizes that in his past life there were no other shelters or secret organizations. The protagonist remembers that while he was unconscious, he did not feel anyone else's presence. But who in that case was this woman, and why did she need to kidnap Sylvia? I notice the protagonist's concern. Winston tries to cheer him up by saying that everything will be fine with his sister, but he won't necessarily help her. I swear that for the rest of my life I will help you in any endeavors and will definitely find your missing sister. Frankly, Michael, I had a plan to defeat Roger even without the genetic weapon, and I want you to look at it. Commander Winston hands the protagonist a small black box containing a black cube. With a wave of 2 fingers, the cube begins to turn into incomprehensible clots of energy and cover the old man's hand. A few moments later, his body, and in particular his left arm, is enveloped in a black substance that resembles armor. Throughout human history, countless myths and legends have created many rumors about those commonly referred to as gods who created this world. Left behind evidence such as these relics are proof of the existence of a higher power, and they possess mysterious powers. After humans reached the peak of their development, they learned about hidden places on this planet called ancient ruins. The small cube I have with me is a relic of an ancient civilization, the armor of the sky god. Michael is very surprised that myths and legends are not fiction and decides to ask if Winston knows where the ancient ruins are. The commander replies that he was appointed to his position more than 40 years ago, and his main motive is to protect this secret. He says he only has one relic in his possession, but with their current technology it's difficult to obtain them without resolving the ancient ruins. Michael remembers that in his past life, the commander had to reach the 2nd floor of the ancient ruins to defeat Roger. Young man, I hope that you can help increase the rate of ruin mining and speed up the opening of the 2nd floor. And as a reward, you can choose any relic there is. The main character thanks the old man for his help, clarifying that he needs help in finding his sister. Winston gives his consent and also wants to discuss ideas and directions in building a shelter, hoping for help from our protagonist. Having finished the negotiations, Michael leaves the commander's office, and at the exit Scott is waiting for him, asking how everything went. On the way to the living quarters, he says that the meeting went well and that things will only get better in the future. Commander Winston spent the entire night in his office, pondering the information he had received from Michael and solving organizational issues. Already in the early morning, he decides to contact Professor Bruce to pass on to him the information he received about a powerful weapon. While the professor explains that he is busy with research that was prompted by a young man he met recently, Winston says that he also received some information from him. They are both surprised that one young guy has had such a strong influence on the course of their common confrontation in the fight against the apocalypse. Bruce says he never thought that two old men who are almost 200 years old would be helped by some young guy and forced to move forward. Winston suggests that Michael's appearance in their hideout is not a mere coincidence, and that he may be a new hope for them. Our main character is met by Megan and Lena, who are happy to see him and that everything is fine with him. Megan says that after she was captured, Commander Winston immediately sent several people to her who managed to save her, after which our heroes understand that the situation is gradually improving and go to the canteen to have a little snack. Meanwhile, Commander Roger is beside himself with rage, realizing that Michael, whom he sent to kill his people, has come to the shelter. In a fit of rage, he orders the recruitment of Awakened to continue, and the training of their special unit to be intensified. Assuming that Commander Winston is trying to strengthen his position, he is in no way going to give in to him. That evening, two sentries stationed on the walls of the shelter take turns at the observation post. While one of the soldiers looks around through binoculars, the second reassures him, saying that there has been no danger for several weeks and there is nothing to worry about. Suddenly, the man notices a huge crowd of zombies moving straight towards them, and the entire shelter becomes alarmed. All people are informed that a large group of infected has appeared 15 kilometers away from them and is moving towards their base, and according to rough estimates, there are more than 10,000 individuals there. This can't be. Our base is still under construction and we are completely unable to cope with such a number of enemies. Winston immediately contacts Commander Roger, who says that he is aware of the situation and that if they do nothing, the walls will be destroyed. He also says that his awakened squad is the only one capable of fighting back against such a number of infected, and he has one condition. Roger asks in return that Winston hand over all his military powers to him and resign. In the commander's rage, Winston does not understand how, in such a hopeless situation, when the lives of other people are at stake, Roger cares about gaining power and authority. My dear friend, I have told you long ago that in an extreme situation only with absolute power can you rule as a king. Winston does not understand what to do in such a hopeless situation, when the lives of tens of thousands of people are at stake. The commander gives his consent, after which the cattle immediately begin to try to stop him, saying that under no circumstances should power be transferred into Roger's hands. We have no choice but to ask him for help. I can't look for profit when the lives of my people are at stake. At this very time, Roger orders all their forces to be transferred to the front lines to fight the zombies, and also immediately start mobilizing their awakened squad because he doesn't want his shelter to be damaged. Meanwhile, panic and rumors begin to spread among the military about what is happening outside the shelter walls. Commander Winston comes down to the people, asking for silence and reporting that a huge horde of infected is moving towards them. He asks people to remain calm because they should not be afraid and let everyone be ready to defend this place at the cost of their own lives. Right now, more than half of the shelter's forces will be sent to the front along with Commander Roger's advance party to protect all of humanity. The old man gives a fiery speech trying to raise his fighting spirit and inspire the soldiers to defend all those remnants of people for whom all this was started. Meanwhile, panic begins to break out in the corridors of the residential sectors, and Scott rushes to meet with Michael. He informs him that the shelter is currently being attacked by more than 10,000 zombies, and Commander Winston was forced to turn to Roger for help. He also reports that the commander was forced to make a deal, which included the conditions of a complete transfer of power and command over the shelter. Michael can't believe it, saying that this can't be done, and asks to tell him where the commander is now. Scott says that Winston has already gone to the front lines, and he also needs to hurry, after which he hands the main character a map indicating the escape routes. Finally, he asks not to worry about Megan and Lena, and promises to take care of them. The protagonist understands that the wave of zombies moving towards them should have appeared only after a month, as it was in his past life. But everything is going much better. Meanwhile, the military, using helicopters, observes a huge accumulation of mutants moving towards the shelter. Using military equipment located around the perimeter, as well as bombs, they try to stop the moving horde. Unfortunately, this is not enough, and although they manage to thin out the ranks of mutants, the main forces of zombies move towards the shelter. I begin to transfer military equipment towards the base. A detachment of awakened people of Commander Roger arrives at the front line. The man leading their squad declares that after much training, they are finally ready to fight in real life. Awakened humans are able to easily fight off ordinary low-ranking zombies. This picture gives confidence and optimism to ordinary soldiers who hope that the power of superhumans will help them cope with this threat. The morale of the awakened begins to rise, and they are confident in their abilities, saying that dealing with mutants is as easy as crushing ants. At that very moment, one of the warriors of the detachment tries to warn his friend of the danger approaching him. Before he could react, his body was instantly cut into two parts by a very powerful and dangerous enemy. Behind him is a mutated awakened zombie with truly incredible power. The squad leader says that they have about 200 people, which is enough to deal with regular zombies, but the awakened ones outnumber them, and at this rate they will lose. At this time, on the walls of the shelter, the commanders watch the battle unfold. Commander Roger is informed that 50 men from his squad have already died, and he orders them to retreat immediately. Old Winston, we cannot afford to sacrifice the awakened just like that and must give them a chance to regroup. The two captains are also informed that due to the sudden attack, the amount of military supplies is running out very quickly, and there is still about half of the available weapons left. Commander Winston orders a team to be created and the mines to be restored in front of the shelter, and also orders that civilians be taken to the bomb shelter if necessary. He distributes the task among his subordinates, ordering them to manage their defense points and not allow the slightest mistake. Looking at this, Roger understands that even in an emergency, his colleague is able to issue tasks in an organized manner, and he really deserves respect. After half an hour of preparation, the wave of zombies reaches the last line of defense, which contains mortar guns and traps along the road to the shelter. Roger says that they don't have enough power from him to fight for a long time, and they have no choice but to admit their defeat. He asks to stop showing off and follow him, because if he and the other awakened ones unite, they will still be able to fight back. There is nothing we can do in this situation, and if we continue like this, we will all eventually be finished off. Scott, realizing that the situation is becoming hopeless, wants to take Commander Winston to a bomb shelter because it is becoming too dangerous on the front lines. Unexpectedly for everyone present, one advanced zombie manages to get close to the very walls of the shelter. He rushes to attack Commander Winston, and everyone present does not even have time to react to save their captain. The old man is called out by someone's voice asking if all the fun is over, after which in an instant the mutant is cut into pieces. In front of our hero stands Michael, armed with several katanas, who apologizes for being late, as he spent too long looking for the armory. The old man is surprised by the appearance of the main character, and he, in turn, asks the commander to be a little more trusting and not doubt that he will leave them. Michael asks everyone to remain calm, promising that nothing will happen to the shelter and that he himself will be able to deal with this whole crowd of infected. The protagonist jumps off the walls of the shelter and in mid-flight, his faithful familiar Goldie transforms into a colossal beast, taking on her true form. At this time, all the people present on the walls are surprised by the behavior of the young man, considering him a complete madman who just jumped off the high walls and is now going to die. A powerful and colossal column of fire flares up in front of their faces, rising into the air in front of their faces. They look up to see Michael riding on Goldie, not understanding where this lion-like creature came from right under their noses. Looking at everything that is happening, Commander Winston catches himself thinking that Michael can actually defeat the zombie horde alone. Our protagonist, without wasting a second, goes on an attack on the front lines, demolishing everything in his path. He splits up with his familiar, who begins to hold off most of the low-ranking infected while our protagonist is busy clearing out the stronger ones. Michael finds himself thinking that from a close distance the wave of zombies looks simply monstrous, and in his past life he was never so close to the epicenter of the battle. Making his way through the crowd of mutants, an advanced beast-infected with snake skills stands in his way. Dodging this monster in this way, he understands why the squad of awakened ones suffered a crushing defeat, because among the crowd of low-ranking mutants, there are truly powerful opponents. Trying to attack an advanced snake zombie, his katana simply breaks on its thick and impenetrable skin. Our protagonist tries to regroup and retreat for a second, dodging attacks and thinking about a new plan of action. Realizing that conventional weapons will not be able to harm advanced zombies in any way, he decides that it is necessary to use supernatural abilities. His body is covered in a powerful purple aura, and he charges forward, his evolution tree informing him that he has already killed over 800 infected. The technique that our main character used bears fruit. He manages to defeat the zombie snake, as well as absorb 1% of his skills. Michael is well aware that he has only dealt with 1,000 mutants, and that he still has a very long battle ahead of him. He continues to chop up the flesh of the dead with even more pain in his heart, as if he were cutting vegetables for a salad. In the heat of battle, he thinks that activating the ability to devour with bare hands is rather inconvenient, and it would be nice to come up with another way. He suggests that it is possible to activate the ability to devour energy by transferring some of one's powers into the weapon. His katanas become covered in a bright purple glow, and he uses them to strip down hordes of zombies. His theory turns out to be correct, and the experiment bears fruit. But conventional weapons are unable to withstand the full force of ability devouring, and the katanas quickly become unusable. At this time, Goldie, using powerful area attacks in the form of fire breath, deals with most of the ordinary low-ranking mutants. The captains, watching everything that is happening from the walls of the shelter, cannot believe their eyes, because our protagonist single-handedly manages to stop the wave of zombies. Looking around, Commander Winston notices that thanks to Michael's actions, morale among the ordinary soldiers has risen greatly. He also orders Scott to gather all the awakened people under his command as soon as possible and bring them here. This young guy who just arrived at the shelter immediately rushed into battle, and we can't just sit back and watch all this. Looking at this, Roger is indignant, thinking that all this time his old friend was simply hiding such a powerful weapon under his command.